the cooper, the wheelwright, and the tinsmith, three trades that Amish communities in Pennsylvania Dutch country and Holmes County, Ohio, still practice today, and three of the 12 trades that once employed more working men in this country than any factory ever did, with every single one of them gone from mainstream American life within the span of a single working lifetime. Pull up a chair. My grandfather knew men who worked all 12 of these trades personally, not as historical curiosities, but as the fellow down the road who fixed your wagon wheel, or the man in town who made every barrel the local cider mill used. By the time my father was my age, most of these 12 had vanished completely from the wider world. Not slowly over centuries the way trades usually fade, but inside one human lifetime, sometimes inside a single decade. What's remarkable is that, while the rest of America forgot them, plain people communities, the Amish and Mennonite settlements rooted in the Anabaptist tradition, kept many of these same skills alive in working form, passing them through the journeyman and apprentice tradition the way they always had been passed. I want to walk through all 12 of them, name exactly what they did, and name exactly what erased them from mainstream life, because the how matters just as much as the what. Number 1, the cooper. A cooper built wooden barrels and casks, and before you dismiss that as a small thing, understand that nearly every liquid and dry good shipped anywhere in America before the 1930s traveled inside a barrel a cooper built by hand, curving and fitting wooden staves so tightly together that they held whiskey, flour, nails, and gunpowder without a drop or a grain escaping. The tools of the trade, the draw knife for shaping staves, the crows for cutting the groove that seats the barrel head, the howl for smoothing the interior, the bung borer for the tap hole, each required years to master. And that mastery is precisely what Amish cooperatives in Lancaster County have quietly kept alive. There were actually two distinct specialties within the trade: wet coopers who built liquid-tight barrels for whiskey and beer, and dry or slack coopers who built the looser barrels meant for flour, apples, and nails, where a perfect seal wasn't required. It took years to train a journeyman cooper to that precision, and a skilled cooper could shape a stave with a draw knife to a tolerance most people couldn't manage today, even with modern tools. The trade was erased by two things arriving close together: the steel drum and the cardboard box, both of which could be stamped out by machine in seconds, rather than assembled by hand in hours. And by the time the 1940s arrived, a working cooperative was already a rarity, rather than a town fixture. Number 2, the wheelwright. Distinct from a blacksmith, a wheelwright, and his close cousin, the wainwright, who built the wagon body itself, specialized entirely in building and repairing wooden wagon wheels, a skill involving steam bending the felloes that formed the wheel's rim and shrinking a hot iron tire onto it so precisely that the wood and metal locked together as the iron cooled, a process called tiring the wheel that required reading the exact moment the iron had cooled enough to grip without splitting the wood beneath it. Every wagon, every carriage, every piece of horse-drawn equipment in this country depended on a wheelwright's work, holding under load for years at a time, often carrying a full-grown family and their belongings over rutted dirt roads for decades without failing. You can still find working wheelwrights in Amish settlements today, in Holmes County, Ohio, and in the Pennsylvania Dutch communities, because horse-drawn transportation never left those communities the way it left everyone else. The automobile and the pneumatic rubber tire erased this trade almost entirely from the wider world within 20 years, since a wooden wheel built for a horse-drawn cart had no place under a Model T, and most wheelwrights either retrained as auto mechanics or simply closed their shops for good. Number 3, the tinsmith. Before sheet metal could be stamped by machine into uniform shapes, a tinsmith hand-formed tin into cookware, lanterns, buckets, and roofing, soldering seams by hand and shaping every piece individually with mallets and forms over a wooden or iron stake anvil. A good tinsmith's lantern or coffee pot might last 40 years, dented and resoldered along the way rather than thrown out. And a skilled tinsmith could often identify exactly which mallet blow had caused a given dent just by looking at it. Industrial stamping presses, capable of producing 1,000 identical tin pieces in the time a tinsmith took to finish one, erased the trade by simple economics. Not because the handmade version was worse, but because it could no longer compete on price once a machine entered the equation. And most tinsmiths who survived the transition did so by becoming repairmen rather than makers. Number 4, the lamplighter. Towns and cities once employed lamplighter's, specifically to walk fixed routes every evening, lighting gas street lamps one by one with a long pole and a flame, then walking the same route again at dawn to extinguish them and trim the wicks for the next night. Some cities employed dozens of these men working in shifts, each responsible for a set number of lamps along a fixed beat. And the job carried real civic importance, since a dark street in 1880 was a genuinely dangerous one for both crime and simple navigation. The electric streetlight, wired to a central grid and switched on automatically, erased the entire profession within roughly 15 years of widespread electrification. And most of those men never worked in lighting again, since there was simply no equivalent skilled position left for a centrally switched system to need filling. Number 5, the ice cutter, sometimes called the iceman. Before household refrigeration existed, an entire seasonal industry harvested ice from frozen lakes and rivers in winter, cut it into manageable blocks with long ice saws, packed it in sawdust-insulated ice houses where it could keep through an entire summer, and delivered it door to door throughout the warmer months for household ice boxes. This was dangerous, physical, seasonal work. Cutting ice on a frozen lake carried real risk of drowning, and an entire delivery economy. The iceman's daily route, the icebox drip pan that had to be emptied, the block sizes sold by weight and marked with a card in the window telling the iceman how much to leave, existed around it. The compressor-driven home refrigerator erased the ice harvesting industry almost completely by the early 1930s, taking the delivery route model down with it and putting an end to a seasonal trade that had employed entire towns along the Great Lakes and the Hudson River for generations. Number 6, the blacksmith, and alongside him, the farrier, who specialized specifically in the shoeing of horses and is often counted as a separate trade from the general blacksmith. Not the decorative blacksmith you might picture at a Renaissance fair, but the working tradesman every town depended on for horseshoes, tool repair, hardware, hinges, and anything else made of iron that a community needed, working at a forge that ran hot from before sunrise most days. A competent blacksmith was as essential to a 19th century town as an auto mechanic is today, arguably more so, since nearly everyone needed his services regularly, whether they owned a horse or simply needed a broken plow blade reforged before planting season. The farrier's trade, notably, never fully disappeared. It persists wherever horses are worked, and in Amish communities, it remains an active, necessary skill practiced within the same guild-like apprenticeship system that has always governed it. Mass-produced hardware shipped by rail, the decline of horse-drawn transportation, and centralized factory ironwork eroded the general blacksmith's trade gradually rather than all at once, until what had been a universal small-town profession became a specialty practiced mostly for decorative ironwork and historical demonstration. Number 7, the harness maker, also called a saddler. This trade involved making and repairing leather harness, tack, and saddlery for working draft animals, a precise skill requiring an understanding of how leather stretched under load and where stitching needed reinforcement to survive years of pulling a plow or a loaded wagon over rough ground. A harness maker had to know exactly how a collar should sit against a horse's shoulder to avoid sores that could take a working animal out of commission for weeks. Every farm depended on harness that fit correctly and held under strain, and a poorly made or poorly repaired harness could mean a serious accident in the field. This is another trade that Amish communities in Pennsylvania Dutch country and Ohio have never stopped needing. Wherever draft horses are still pulling plows and wagons, there's still a harness maker keeping those animals in working condition. The shift from draft animals to gasoline-powered tractors and trucks across the early 20th century erased the bulk of this trade's necessity for everyone else within about 2 decades, since an engine has no shoulders to chafe and no need for a harness at all. Number 8, the cobbler, specifically the shoe repairman rather than the shoe seller. A cobbler resoled, restitched, and rebuilt shoes that were made to be repaired indefinitely, often the same pair lasting a working man 20 years, through multiple resoles, with good leather boots, sometimes outliving the man who bought them and getting passed to a son. This trade didn't disappear from a single invention, so much as from a shift in how shoes themselves were manufactured. Cheap, mass-produced footwear with glued rather than stitched soles that cost less to replace outright than to pay a cobbler to repair, which slowly made the cobbler's skill economically irrelevant, even though the skill itself never got worse, and the work a cobbler could still do remained just as good as it always had been. Now, before we get to the last 4, I want you to notice the pattern forming here because it changes shape right about now. The first 7 trades we covered were erased by changing materials and changing transportation. The same forces that plain communities resisted by holding onto horses, hand tools, and the apprenticeship and guild traditions that kept knowledge moving between generations. The next 5 were erased by something different entirely. Communication and automation reaching into work that used to require a trained human being sitting in the middle of the process. Number 9, the switchboard operator. Before automatic telephone switching existed, every single phone call in America had to be manually connected by an operator, physically plugging your line into the line you were trying to reach, sitting at a switchboard wearing a headset, sometimes connecting hundreds of calls an hour by hand, and remembering regular customers' voices well enough to recognize them before they even gave their number. This was overwhelmingly women's work by the early 20th century, and it employed enormous numbers of them in cities, often considered a respectable entry-level career for a young woman at the time. The direct dial automatic switching system, rolled out by telephone companies starting in the 1920s and largely complete by the 1960s, erased the profession by simply removing the human being from the circuit entirely, replacing a conversation with a dial tone and a series of mechanical relays. Number 10, the telegraph operator. Trained in Morse code, a telegraph operator translated written messages into electrical pulses and back again, serving as the human relay point for nearly all long-distance written communication in America for most of the 19th century, often working entirely by ear, distinguishing dots from dashes by the rhythm of the clicks, rather than reading them off a strip of paper. Railroad stations, newspaper offices, and telegraph company branches all depended on these operators, and the skill took real time to master, since accurate code transmission under pressure during a breaking news event or a railroad emergency was a genuine craft that separated the good operators from the merely competent ones. The telephone and later direct teletype and eventually digital communication made translating messages by hand into electrical code entirely unnecessary, and the trade essentially vanished over the first half of the 20th century, leaving Morse code itself as little more than a historical curiosity within a few decades. Number 11, the milkman, running a home dairy delivery route. Before supermarket refrigeration made buying milk on your own schedule practical, dairies employed delivery routes that brought fresh milk to the doorstep daily or every other day in glass bottles that were collected, washed, and reused, with an empty bottle left out the night before, as a signal for how much to leave the next morning. This was a genuine career, not a side job, with set routes, regular customers, and a relationship between delivery man and household that lasted years. Sometimes the same milkman serving the same families from one generation to the next. Widespread home refrigeration combined with supermarket distribution made daily doorstep delivery unnecessary by the 1960s, and the entire route-based home delivery model for dairy collapsed within about a decade, taking with it a small daily ritual that most households simply stopped noticing they'd lost. Number 12, the elevator operator. Early elevators required a trained operator to manually control speed and stopping position using a lever inside the car, since getting the car level with the floor took real skill. An experienced hand could feel exactly when to ease off, and a poorly judged stop could mean a dangerous step up or down for passengers, or worse, an injury from an uneven landing. Department stores, hotels, and office buildings all employed operators as a matter of necessity, not luxury. And in the largest buildings, an operator might run the same car all day for years, greeting the same office workers by name every morning. The automatic elevator, with its precise leveling system and call button logic perfected through the 1950s and 60s, erased the need for a trained human operator over that same stretch of decades, turning what had been a respected, skilled position into a button anyone could push themselves without a second thought. What strikes me, looking at all 12 of these side by side, is that none of them disappeared because the work got easier or because people stopped needing what these tradesmen provided. People still need barrels, still need their shoes resoled, still need to get to the 14th floor, still need a message delivered across the country in minutes rather than weeks. What disappeared was the necessity of a trained human being doing it by hand. And that's a very different kind of erasure than a trade simply going out of fashion. Every single one of these 12 trades was erased by the same basic pattern. A machine or a system that could do the task faster, cheaper, and without the years of apprenticeship the human version required. And once that machine existed, the economics made the decision for everyone, whether the affected tradesman agreed or not, whether the quality of the new version matched the old, and often whether anyone even noticed the trade-off being made at the time. And here's the part worth sitting with for a moment. In every one of these 12 cases, the people doing the work didn't see it coming with much warning, and they didn't get much say in the matter either. A wheelwright in 1905 had no vote on whether the automobile would succeed. A switchboard operator in 1925 had no say in whether automatic dialing would roll out faster than expected. The decision was made somewhere else entirely, in a boardroom or a patent office, and the trade simply stopped being needed, sometimes within a few short years of being utterly essential. The Amish communities of Lancaster County and Holmes County made a different choice, not because they were unaware of what was coming, but because they decided together, through the same community structures that had governed their guild-like trades for generations, that some things were worth the cost of keeping. My grandfather used to say that a trade dies the same way a path through a field dies. Not all at once, but the moment enough people stop walking it. These 12 walked through American life for generations, supported families, trained apprentices, fed children and paid mortgages, and built entire neighborhoods around the steady, dependable demand for a particular set of hands, and then quietly stopped being walked at all, sometimes within the space of a single working man's career. In the Pennsylvania Dutch settlements, a few of those paths are still being walked today, worn down not by nostalgia, but by genuine daily use. Take care of what you know how to do with your own two hands. It may outlast the machine that's supposed to replace it.